Hebrews 4:14 through 5:10. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has gone through the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to our confession, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way in the same fashion, yet without sin. Therefore, let us draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, in order that we may receive mercy and find grace for timely help. For every high priest who has been taken from men is appointed on behalf of men to the things pertaining to God, in order that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices, being able to deal gently with the ones who are ignorant and being misled, since also he is surrounded by weakness, and because of it, he is obligated to offer sacrifices for sins as concerning the people, thus also concerning himself, and not anyone takes this honor unto himself, but receives it when he is called by God, even as Aaron was. So also Christ did not glorify himself to become high priest, but he who said to him, "You are my son, today I have become a father to you," as also in another place he says, "You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek," who in the days of his flesh, with both prayers and pleadings to the one who is able to save him from death, with loud cries and tears, having offered and having been heard because of his piety, although being a son, he learned obedience from the things which he suffered, and being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all the ones who obey him, having been called by God as high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. In addition to the encouragement, this is my exegetical idea, the encouragement to be careful and diligent from the previous text, the church is encouraged to hold firm and draw near to Christ, our high priest and source of eternal salvation. So this text is a continuation of what preceded it in relationship of lettuce clauses. In 4:1 through 13, we had clauses, subjunctive clause here in verse 1, and as well in verse 11. And this is based upon the encouragement in 3:13. But encourage yourselves each day, as long as it is called today, in order that some of you may not be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. For we have become partners in Christ if we hold firm, and that's the key there, if we hold firm to the beginning of the conviction until the end. Today, encourage one another not to fall away as in the wilderness, but to hold firm, and I put in there till the end, until the end. So this encouragement follows with these 4 subjunctive clauses, subordinating that, or describing how to encourage one another. Let us be careful, let us be diligent, and then today, in this video, let us hold firmly to our confession, and let us draw near with confidence. So the church is encouraged to hold firm and draw near to Christ, our high priest and source of eternal salvation. So let me explain this text briefly so that we can see what's the information that is underneath both of these clauses or leading up to it. So, since we have a great high priest who has gone through the heavens, Jesus the Son, is a continuation of the description of Jesus, our high priest, which is mentioned, the high priest is mentioned here 5 times. I forgot that one right there. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this continuing idea that was previously established in our text about Jesus, our high priest. Over here in chapter 2, verse 17, Jesus, who was, let me see here, let me get out my Bible. Jesus, who was greater than the angels, God sent so that by the grace he might taste death for everyone. And then it goes on to say, since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared their humanity, so that by his death, this is why Jesus is greater than the angels. It begins right here. In order that through his death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that he might free those who all their lives held in slavery by the fear of death. He was obligated to the seed of Abraham, which makes the point as God, Jesus, the seed of Eve, who would come to fulfill this promise of making Abraham's descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. He was obligated in every respect to become like humanity to make atonement. So he suffered. So this description of Jesus as our high priest, which begins the first time is mentioned in the book of Hebrews in 2:17 as our high priest, is explained why we should carefully consider Jesus and what he's done, so that he would be our help. He is able to help the ones who are being tested. It's really an encouragement to hold on. So we find these same words in chapter 3, verse 14. If we hold firm. So over here, we are called, but we are the house of Christ, chapter 3, verse 6. If we indeed hold on, Christ is faithful for us, if we hold on to the hope that we boast in. And he's making the point again, but encourage yourselves each day as today, as long as it is called today, in order that some of you may not be hardened, for we have become partners of Christ if we hold firm until the end. The idea is that when we look to Jesus, our great high priest, we see what he has accomplished for his people, of whom we are if we hold on to the end. We have to persevere, even through the testing. So we look to Jesus to be our help in that time of need. So our text today is a description of who Jesus is as our high priest, that we would once again, for the third time, let us hold firmly. So we see it here in 3:14, hold on or hold firm, and then we see it here in 3:6. So we have 3:6. We have it in 3:14, and we have it now in 4:14. To hold on, to hold firm. I'm just going to say hold on. We really need to see that, to hold firmly. Let us hold firmly to our confession. This word confession as well is a repetition that we've had before, that we would hold on to the confession. Holy brothers, partners in the heavenly calling, consider Jesus, the apostle and high priest of our confession. You can see that I put that note there. So that's 3:1. So there's a lot of repetition here to help us to see why we should look to Jesus, our high priest, and how we should find help in him. He is able to help the ones who are being tested. So we might as well put that down here as well. That's in 2:18. We're going to see that again as well. Since we have a great high priest, therefore, and that's a ground for us to hold firm. This reason is also for we have a high priest who is unable to sympathize, but we have one. I'm going to put that as a negative and a positive. Who's not unable to sympathize with our weaknesses in the same fashion, yet without sin. So this is a description of Jesus, our high priest, and why we should hold firmly to our confession. He's gone through the heavens for our benefit. We do not, see there's that negative, do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but he's been tempted in every way, yet without sin. All right, so let us hold firm to that confession, 3:6 and 3:14. Now into this subjective clause. Let us draw near with confidence to the throne in order that we might receive mercy and grace for our timely help. See, there it is once again, this word, timely help. Jesus as our help. For every high priest who has been taken from men is appointed on behalf of men to the things pertaining to God. All right, so this is I'll just say it right here. This is a description of Christ. I'll come back to this. This is a description of Christ. And this up here is a description of the calling on behalf of men of every high priest. For every high priest who's been taken from men is appointed on behalf of men to the things pertaining to God by God. It says, having been called by God as high priest. So you have a calling there, but he receives it when he is called by God. So he is appointed on behalf of men to the things pertaining to God in order that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins. So now we're talking again about the role of the high priest. What's going to happen in the next lesson, picking up at 5:11, in here, in this text, at the very end, he's talking about Jesus who's called as a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. We're going to talk about Melchizedek. We're going to transition into a discussion about Jesus in the order of Melchizedek, like Melchizedek. So we need to understand the high priest and what his role is. And so it would be good for students, for people studying the Bible, to understand the role of the Levitical priesthood, what the high priest does, the sacrifice that he offers in Leviticus 16 on the Day of Atonement, because it is mentioned here in chapter 2, verse 17, he is obligated in the things of God to make atonement for the sins of the people, propitiate and expiate, for because he has suffered when he was tempted, he is able to help the ones who are being tempted, you see. So it's important that we understand the role of the high priest, but we also understand, as a result of that, Christ, who's fulfilled this role as high priest, offering up himself for us that we might go to him when we are in a time of testing for a timely help. We also need to understand that the church that is being addressed here is in Italy, and the timing of the letter is before, let's see, the timing and context is before 70 AD, which is the destruction of the temple. The timing, Paul has already been and written the letter to the Romans. It's possible that they have letters of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, even though they are not established yet. It's possible that Paul brought these letters. It's possible that they've been read to them. They have heard the preaching of the news, the preaching of Christ. And this is important because over here in chapter 4, verses 1 through 13, for surely we also have had the good news preached to us. And then it says, the people out in the desert had the good news preached to them at an early time, but they did not enter the promised land because of disobedience. So the encouragement was to be diligent to enter that rest, the same rest that they failed to enter, we can enter through the ministry of the word and examination of our hearts. So that's where this text comes in. For the word is living and active and sharper than every double-edged sword, penetrating, able to discern, able to expose what is hidden. So the word, through the ministry of preaching, is going to expose our hearts that we might not fall, that our hearts would not be hardened, but we would be drawn to Christ. So we need to be careful, and we need to be diligent. The church at that time in Italy, possibly in Rome, the receivers of the letter to the Hebrews, the Jewish Christians, interesting enough, Paul is addressing the Jewish Christians in the book of Romans as well, showing that they are not the privileged ones, but the gospel is not only for them, but for the Gentiles as well, because they have circumcision and the law. These people are encouraged to look to Jesus, being reminded of what they have heard, being possibly reminded of the letters that they have had read to them. They don't necessarily have copies of them yet, so that they would not fall away. Now that's very interesting, because over here in chapter 5, 11 through 6 and 8, there's going to be a discussion of falling away. We will do this, but those people cannot fall away. They need to press on towards maturity, but those who have fallen away can't come back. So this idea of falling away is not new. It's here through a different word in chapter 4, verse 1. Let us be careful that any of you might not come too late, fall short, or pipto means to fall, lest this, by the same example of disobedience, some may fall. The encouragement is to draw closer to Christ rather than becoming lazy or careless. You need to take every advantage and do everything that you can to look to Jesus, our high priest, to understand what he has accomplished for us, so that in the time of trial and tribulation, under pressure and being tempted to forsake what you believe, whether by laziness or by saving your life, we need to look to Christ and be faithful. William Lane goes on to say, to talk about martyrdom, the potential end result of being martyred. I'm not sure if that's necessarily the conclusion or that's accurate in this at this time when the letter was being written, but truly they were being pressured to forsake their faith and go back to Judaism. So this letter is an encouragement to hold firm to their confession, and it's repeated time and time again, the role of the high priest, Jesus, and what he is accomplishing for us in that role. For every high priest, he's taken from men, he's appointed to offer gifts and sacrifices, to deal gently to the ones who are weak and being misled. All right, those priests are not called by themselves, but they're called of God, even as so Christ was called. So we have this description, high priest, in order that. That's a cause and effect. Every priest has been taken and is appointed in order that. That's the cause. He's taken from men and appointed for our purpose to offer gifts and sacrifices. Now, this is a transition into Jesus. Not everyone takes this honor, but he's called by God. So Christ did not glorify himself, but he was called by God. It's a negative, positive, or it could be a general, specific. And then this right here is a description of Jesus that ultimately says, as high priest, he who said to him, "You are my son," also says, "You are a priest." He prayed prayers of pleading, loud cries and tears on behalf of those who were going to be his children, having offered and been heard because of his piety. He was a son. He learned obedience from what he suffered, and he was made perfect. So this description of Christ in his humanness is also being a son of God and his deity. And we've talked about those two before. He had to be fully man to suffer on our behalfs, in order to impute his righteousness to our accounts. But he also had to be God to fulfill that obligation to be the seed in order to pay the curse in Genesis chapter 3. Or the curse of the covenant, the Sinaitic covenant, the sanction, to pay that curse in order to fulfill God's swearing by himself that he would make Abraham's descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. So we have this, let us draw near in order that means to an end. And this is a reason why, I guess you could say, cause and effect. And then the relationship here would be a ground. So Christ, this is a description of our high priest, so Christ, and the relationship between this section and this section is here. And so then we have to ask ourselves, what is the relationship between this drawing near or this holding firm and this drawing near? And the two of those is a series combined with this above. So we have essentially, let us be careful, let us be diligent, let us hold firm to our confession, let us draw near, is a description how the author is encouraging them that they should hold on versus withdraw. All right. If we hold firm, the people above in this Psalm 95, the Israelites in the desert, many of them died in Korah's rebellion. They were bit by snakes. They were condemned in their grumbling. Many of them had disbelieved despite all the miracles that God was doing and had done to deliver them to the promised land. They didn't. They withdrew and did not hold on. So the author is using this as a quote from David to say, today, if you hear his voice, and this right here, this psalm is quoted at the opening of synagogue to not be like the Israelites in those days, but today to listen to hear his voice, to encourage one another, as long as it is called today, let today be today, to hold firm until the end. So the letter to the Hebrews and is an encouragement today to be careful, to be diligent, to let the word examine your hearts, that you would not withdraw, or your hearts would not be hardened, or there would be unbelief, but in fact you would believe and hold firmly to the confession, and remember what Christ has done for you, to let us draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, because Jesus has done this, the role of the high priest up here, the role of the high priest over here, and then you could actually go back to the very beginning and what Christ has done in chapter 1, the Son of the Radiance. After he provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand, so he's much superior to the angels. So we need to look to Jesus to find comfort, that we would receive mercy and grace in our time of need.